Us now for more on today's breaking developments in a Hannity exclusive, an officer from the Baltimore Police Department. He has exclusive information on the arrest for his own protection. We have disguised both his voice and put him in shadow. Sir, thank you so much for being here.
Good evening, Sean.
Let's talk about what you just heard. A jubilant crowd, celebration. They expect now, there's a crowd seemingly expecting guilty verdicts for all 6 of the officers. What's your reaction to that?
My heart goes out to those officers who have to be standing out there during this, after getting the hugest slap in the face by Marilyn Mosby this morning, then have to stand out on those corners and hear that rhetoric all evening is disgusting.
Yeah.
I mean, to hear it over this earphone, it makes my blood boil.
What is the reaction?
Guys.
What is the reaction of these specific officers and of everyone in the department, sir?
The reaction of the officers today was, I've never seen so many people genuinely stunned of the lack of justice that was done today. You walk through the halls and you would see people crying, sitting by themselves, shaking their heads, hugging each other. It was unbelievable to see at that moment the devastation that was done during that press conference this morning.
The prosecutor claims this was an illegal arrest. Do you know the reason why the cops went after Freddie Gray to begin with at 8:39 that morning?
It was a Sunday morning. The shift commander and 2 other officers were going to do a, crime suppression drug patrol in that area. The area where they were working on North Avenue between Pennsylvania and Mount is probably the biggest drug area in this whole state by far. On a Sunday morning, they observed, Mr. Freddie Gray along in a hand-to-hand transaction on the intersection. 2 people immediately ran from the police. One ran one way, the other ran the other. 2 officers caught Mr. Gray, and the lieutenant backed around and got the other suspect.
So Freddie Gray is a known drug dealer, a heroin dealer, and this is a known drug selling area. Is that correct?
It's probably the biggest drug market on the East Coast, possibly. And if you were to take a pin map with, and put a pin in for every shooting or homicide that was in that 4-block area, it would be nothing but pin marks. It's a violent area. It's a drug trafficking area. There's guns and murders and shootings on a weekly basis up there.
Did they see him selling drugs or just suspect he might have been selling drugs?
He was observed in a hand-to-hand transaction, small items in exchange for currency, at which time they approached Mr. Gray and the other individual, at which time they both fled. A foot pursuit was called out. Mr. Gray was stopped in the 1700 block of Pressbury. The other suspect, I believe, was stopped in the 1700 block of Fulton, I believe. So
they saw so the reason they chased him is they thought they saw a drug. Was that put in their report?
Not that I saw, but in cases like this, when drugs aren't necessarily located, and there's times when you would omit that possibly, where if you found Mr. Gray in possession with a knife, you would just rely upon that for your statement of probable cause. Since there was no recovery of drugs, the officers thought they were safe and just arresting Mr. Gray for the knife.
Do we know if there was a stun gun used in the arrest?
There's no stun gun used in the arrest.
Have we gotten back a toxicology report?
The preliminary toxicology report was done at the University of Maryland. Shock trauma. Mr. Gray's urine was tested and found positive for heroin and marijuana.
Whoa. So this has not been made public before. And you're saying that the toxicology report, a preliminary report, has come back and his urine tested positive for heroin and marijuana?
Correct.
Now, I know that he has an arrest record for being a drug dealer or a known heroin dealer. Was he known to be a user of the drug?
If you were to go on averages, when people flee in Baltimore during a drug transaction, they do 2 things. The first thing they do would be possibly try to throw it, in their flight. The second choice would be to ingest it. And 9 times out of 10, they'll stick the drugs right in their mouth, chomp them up, take a bottle of water, swallow them, and they're never recovered.
Okay, so if he was not a normal heroin user and he did ingest it, couldn't there be a possible very negative reaction to a first-time heroin use?
There's cases where people have swallowed entire packs of 25 gel caps down their throat and swallowed them. And we've had cases in the past where people have overdosed and died in that circumstance. If Mr. Gray swallowed, Lord knows how many pills, 3, 4, 5, 10, there would obviously be an adverse, effect on his respirations, his heart rate, his thinking, and his actions.
Did the officers, do you know, because you've spoken to them, did the officers know or suspect that he was high on these drugs at the time? Because this has not been made public. I'd like to know why this hasn't been made public before, but did the officers that you spoke to, did they suspect he was high on heroin or pot or both?
I guess you could say by his, erratic actions being put in the van, where, experts would say that he was able to get in that van on his own. That, his actions would be those of someone under the influence of something. But like I said, in that area of West Baltimore, it's a daily occurrence where you come into contact with numerous people in that state.
Yeah, because if he was not a regular heroin user, is it possible, you've seen people, I assume, in the course of your work, and he used heroin, and this could be for the first time, would that maybe explain the initial report by the other prisoner that he was banging his head and trying to injure himself, even though he has now recanted that?
It could be an explanation, because if he's not a heroin user, his tolerance would be extremely low. If he were to swallow just several gel caps, his actions would be, obviously lethargic, depressed breathing, depressed heart rate, and, he wouldn't be in a right frame of mind, to say the least.
What about the prosecutor, Marilyn Mosby? And she spoke directly to the demonstrators, and she made a number of comments while she made her statement, including to the people of Baltimore, I heard your call for justice. Later on, she said that a couple of times, our time is now. Did you find that statement political?
Definitely. If you were even just to, it's only justice when it's convenient to her. If you were just even look superficially at the conflicts of interest in this case right now, you would shake your head and say, how is it that Dwight Pettit, her mentor, and Billy Murphy, her on her transition team and her largest donor, is representing the Gray family? You could say, why does her husband, Nick Mosby, is a councilman in that area where all this violence is taking place?
So her husband's a councilman, and also she received financial support and transition support from the Gray family attorney. So you think there's a huge conflict of interest? Is this talked a lot about in the circles of police officers that you deal with every day?
Yes. And you could see, Nick Mosby on TV, arm in arm with protesters, and the next day his wife is, lecturing us on justice. You got to be kidding me.
What about the claims that he was seeking prompt medical attention, and there was controversy over a stop that was not initially reported? What can you tell us about that?
He was initially, obviously, you've seen the videotape, asking for medical assistance. And I can't speak for the officers in every aspect, but I can tell you through experience that when you arrest somebody in Baltimore, one of the biggest cards they like to play so they avoid going to our central booking intake facility is to say, I'm hurt, take me to the hospital. Because the last thing an aggressive officer who wants to make arrests and better that community wants to do is be out of service all day on a Sunday to try to, appease someone who's not hurt. So I could understand, where they're coming from with that.
I talked to other sources who told me that Freddie was well known to most officers, and he often, quote, carried on when he was arrested. Did you know this individual?
No, I didn't personally, but I do know of Dante Allen, the cohort in the back of the van.
You do know him, the one that changed the story?
Correct. The day after we give the prosecutor in this case the case folder for the homicide, case folder, in reference to the death of Freddie Gray, the police integrity state's attorney, the chief deputy to Marilyn Mosby, somehow the best friend of Jan Bledsoe, who's Jane Miller, is able to contact an anonymous witness, Mr. Allen, out of the blue. It seems highly unlikely this is just mere coincidence.
I want to go through this. So the deputy state attorney, Janice Bledsoe, is in a relationship with the reporter that broke the story about the other prisoner changing his story.
Correct. It's a well-known fact that Miss Bledsoe and Miss Miller are very close friends.
So I guess you suspect then that pressure was brought to bear on this individual.
Right. And you know what? The best story that you're going to get from somebody is right after the incident. As time goes on, and Mr. Allen would have no idea that Mr. Gray died or is involved in this worldwide crisis right now. Obviously, a lot of witnesses in Baltimore who do see things and do come forward initially do recant over time due to the pressures of the neighborhood and the pressure that would be put on Mr. Allen in this circumstance when the whole world is watching what he's saying and he has to live in that neighborhood. He was doomed to failure from the start. Once he was outed by Miss Miller, it was a foregone conclusion that Mr. Allen was going to change his testimony to avoid living in that neighborhood under those circumstances.
We are obviously protecting your identity. Do you feel you're at risk if your identity were to become known to the prosecutor?
Definitely. I mean, I don't have the same First Amendment rights as the protesters or the thugs. I have to come and speak up for my brothers and sisters who are standing out there and being unfairly prosecuted. You know, I'm defending my brothers against the president. I'm defending them against the mayor. I'm defending them against the state's attorney. I'm one man trying to speak for every man and woman in the Baltimore Police Department who was just punched in the face today. I buried detectives, I buried officers, and what she said this morning opened up all those caskets and just spit on all of them. It was a disgrace to anybody who laid down their life for this city to have to be subjected to what she said this morning.
You know, as we still go over this case, one question remains, and that is, how did this severing of his spinal cord with his neck happen? How did the injury occur? The prosecutor suggests it happened in the van. What are the cops there saying happened?
There would be no other information that I would have be privy to that it didn't happen in the van. And at no time would anybody ever say that anybody took liberties on Mr. Gray in that van. The injuries that Mr. Gray sustained were due to his own hand or his own actions. There was no one responsible for those injuries except for Mr. Gray. If the worst thing our officers did was fail to seatbelt a combative prisoner, then so be it. But to make that jump from unseatbelted prisoner to second-degree murder is absurd.
Now, you have obviously been involved in the, how many years have you been, well, I don't want to ask you that. That might give away your identity. But you've been on the job for a significant period of time. You know the statutes for second-degree murder. You know the statutes as it relates to manslaughter. You know what is noted for these. For example, second-degree murder, you need to show a depraved heart. The elements for involuntary manslaughter, you have to show that somebody acted in a grossly negligent manner. The only thing I heard from the prosecutor today is that the police did not put the seatbelt on and may have not given medical attention in a timely fashion. I didn't hear any other evidence. Do you know what she's basing these very, very significant charges on then?
I'm very familiar with the standards that we have to meet to charge somebody with homicide. If you were to go to the homicide unit and look in the file cabinets or on the detective's desk, there are 80 cases that could be closed today if the prosecutor or Miss Mosby would choose to charge them. She wants justice when it's convenient for her. She could care less about justice to the dozens upon dozens of mothers that she refuses to charge in cases that are exponentially stronger than this case.
So you believe that she basically did this today to appease a crowd of people that were loud?
Definitely.
Yeah.
For political reasons and to avoid, further riots and looting, she sacrificed 6 officers who were doing their job that Sunday morning to appease a mob. and political friends and political donors and her husband.
When did the police realize Freddie was in physical trouble? Because there were 4 separate stops. When did they realize he was in trouble?
En route, when the wagon man started to transport Mr. Freddie to CBIF, there was an initial call that he needed units to respond to assist him with an uncooperative prisoner in the back of the van.
So in other words, they stopped the van.
attempt.
So in other words, one of the stops, or at least 1 or 2 of the stops, were because he was being irate in the back of the van, which kind of corroborated the first story of the other prisoner, right?
Correct.
Okay.
The wagon man requested a unit to help him since he was by himself to try to, see what was going on in the back of the van.
Did the mayor of your city tell you officers on Monday to stand down?
From what I heard from everybody and from what I heard on the radio, there was under no circumstances were we not to engage anybody doing anything. It was people over property, let them do what they want, give them as much property as they want, just don't engage.
Where did
You can
police...
see what they said to one of your reporters the other day. If they start fighting you, we can't help you to avoid a riot. That was direct from a commander.
Are police talking among themselves that maybe they're not in a position to do their jobs if they're going to be prosecuted? Has that come up?
That's something about police. Regardless of the circumstances, regardless how much this breaks your heart, regardless of how the community that you protect and serve on a daily basis, where you've been injured, where you've had friends killed, where you've been away from your family, but you continue to dedicate yourself to that, these officers will do their job. They will, during the speech by Miss Mosby, no one would even think about talking about a double homicide that occurred on the other side of town. But,
Yeah.
Officers will, suit up, go to that homicide. You'll go down the steps, and you'll see officers putting on their riot gear to go stand out there at Pennsylvania North amongst that crowd being called murderers and spit upon for the next 10 hours. But they'll go and do it because that's their job.
So let me go
They
back.
sacrifice themselves every day, above and beyond, every day.
Let me go back to the toxicology report. You said the preliminary report showed that Freddie Gray, and this is new tonight, was on heroin and marijuana. When will that be made public?
I guess the final report would come from the medical examiner's office, which at some point would be made public.
Is there any other facts in this case that you want the public to know before other people maybe rush to judgment? Anything that would help them maybe understand a little bit more what happened here?
I could just say that the death of Mr. Gray was completely unfortunate, but at no point did any officers intentionally set out that morning while they're doing their jobs to at any point hurt Mr. Gray. The circumstances of Mr. Gray's death are the result of Mr. Gray, and that's it. It's not from the wagon man. It's not from the shift lieutenant who was out there doing drug work, or the 2 officers who was chasing people through the most drug-infested, violent neighborhood in this city. Putting their lives at risk at that moment, they started doing it.
If you were... Yeah, go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
If you were to be identified by your department, what would happen?
I would face a possible termination.
You'd be fired, you think?
I believe so.
But you feel so compelled to speak out because you feel this is such an injustice?
It's the biggest... I came into that interview thinking there's got to be justice. But after that, the lack of justice that was done to this department today, someone had to speak out. When I turn on the news and I see our mayor, who on Monday night refused to even acknowledge that there were 20 officers hurt and in hospitals. She deferred to someone else to speak about it.
There's now 100 people. I want to thank you, sir, for sharing your story with us and breaking news here tonight. And you won't be identified by me, so good luck to them trying to figure that out. But I appreciate you sharing it. I think the public wants to know more of what has actually happened and the other side of the story. And there seems to be a lot more that will be coming out in the days and weeks ahead. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Yeah, God bless you, Sean, and God bless the Baltimore Police Department.
Thank you, sir. Joining us.